They called me a messenger of God. I led armies, crowned a king, and saved a dying nation. But when I was captured, he said nothing. The voices that once guided me were silent. So I asked myself, was it truly God I served, or men who used his name? This is how France's greatest hero was left to burn. I was a girl who heard God. Not in whispers. Not in dreams. But in voices so clear they shattered the silence of my father's fields like the ringing of bells at dawn. Saint Michael. Saint Catherine. Saint Margaret. They spoke to me as if I were not a peasant child covered in dirt and sheep's wool, but something worthy, something chosen. I did not ask for this. I was 13 when the first voice came, standing beneath the old tree where the village children danced in summer. The light bent around me, and I fell to my knees, trembling. The voice told me I would save France. France, a kingdom I had only heard of in the mouths of soldiers passing through, their faces hollowed by defeat. France, broken and bleeding under English boots. France, a word that meant nothing to a girl who had never seen a city. But the voices did not lie. By 17, I could no longer ignore them. The English had taken everything, Orleans was under siege, the Dauphin cowered in Chinon, and France itself was a corpse waiting for burial. My father called me mad. My mother wept. But I left anyway, because God does not ask, he commands. I rode to Chinon with nothing but faith and a borrowed horse. The court laughed when I arrived. A peasant girl in a torn dress, demanding to see the uncrowned prince. But I saw him, Charles, pale and frightened, hiding among his nobles like a boy pretending to be king. I walked straight to him, though he had disguised himself to test me. The voices had shown me his face. Gentle Dauphin, I said, kneeling, God has sent me to crown you at Reims. He stared at me as if I were an apparition. Perhaps I was. They gave me armor. A sword. A banner stitched with the names of Jesus and Mary. And I rode to Orleans like an angel wrapped in steel. The soldiers did not believe at first, how could they? But when I stood at the gates and raised my banner high, something shifted. Hope. Faith. Fury. I did not fight like a man. I fought like a vision made flesh. The English fell back. The siege broke. The people sang my name in the streets as if I were a saint already. I was 19 years old, and I had done what kings could not. We marched to Reims. Every step felt like prophecy unfolding. Charles walked beside me now, no longer a boy but a symbol, the king I had been sent to crown. When the archbishop placed the crown upon his head, I wept. Not from joy, but from relief. My mission was complete. God had used me, and I had not failed him. I knelt before Charles in that golden cathedral, my banner still in my hands, and for one perfect moment, I believed the world had been made right. But I saw it, even then, the way the courtiers looked at me. Not with gratitude. With fear. With resentment. I was too loud, too pure, too certain. A peasant girl who spoke to God had no place in a palace built on lies. I had crowned a king. I did not yet understand that kings do not kneel to God, they kneel to power. And I had become too powerful to keep. I thought victory would bring peace. I was wrong. The war did not end at Reims. The English still held Paris. Burgundy still bled France from within. But Charles, the king I had crowned, no longer needed me. Or perhaps he feared what I represented, a power that did not come from blood or gold, but from something he could never control. I begged him to let me fight. The voices still called to me, urging me forward. But the court whispered poison in his ears. They said I had grown reckless. Arrogant. That my visions were delusions, my victories mere luck. Charles looked at me now the way men look at weapons they no longer need, with distant gratitude and quiet dread. I should have stayed. I should have knelt and obeyed. But I was not made for silence. I rode out without his blessing, leading men who still believed. We pushed toward Compiègne, desperate to break the siege. But the gates closed too soon. The Burgundians swarmed like wolves. My horse fell. I swung my sword until my arms burned, but there were too many. Too many hands pulling me down into the mud. They dragged me from the battlefield in chains. I waited for rescue. Surely Charles would ransom me, I had given him a kingdom. Surely France would not abandon the girl who had bled for her. But the days passed in darkness, and no one came. Not the king. Not the army. Not even a letter. The Burgundians sold me to the English like livestock. 10,000 livres. The price of a saint. In my cell, I prayed until my voice cracked. I begged the voices to return, to tell me this was still part of God's plan. But the silence was absolute. Colder than the stone walls. Heavier than the iron around my wrists. I began to understand, then, what I had never allowed myself to see: I was not a savior. I was a symbol. And symbols are only valuable until they become inconvenient. Charles wore his crown in Reims, surrounded by advisors and luxury, while I rotted in an English dungeon. He had what he wanted. My purpose was finished. And a king does not risk his throne for a peasant girl who spoke to God. The voices had led me here. To this cell. To this betrayal. And for the first time since I was 13 years old, I wondered if I had heard them wrong. Or if God himself had always known I was meant to burn. They called it a trial. But trials seek truth. This was theater, a stage built for my damnation. The English brought me to Rouen in chains. Not to a dungeon, but to a courtroom filled with bishops and scholars, men in crimson robes who spoke Latin like weapons. They did not want to execute a soldier. They wanted to execute a heresy. To prove that France's savior was a witch, a liar, a demon in girl's flesh. Bishop Cauchon led the interrogation. His voice was soft, patient, like a priest hearing confession. But his eyes were sharp as blades. Every question was a trap. Every answer a noose tightening. "Do you believe you are in God's grace?" he asked. If I said yes, I was arrogant, claiming certainty no mortal should possess. If I said no, I condemned myself as a sinner unworthy of divine guidance. I stared at him, this man who wore a cross but served only power, and I answered the only way I could. If I am not, may God place me there. If I am, may God keep me there. They hated that. Truth always enrages those who trade in lies. Day after day, they circled me like vultures. They demanded I renounce my voices, admit they were demons, delusions, the devil's whispers. They called my visions madness. My mission pride. My armor an abomination against God's design for women. I refused. Not because I was brave. Because to deny the voices was to deny everything I had suffered for. Every battle. Every scar. Every moment I had believed I was something more than a peasant girl destined to die forgotten. If my voices were false, then I was nothing. Worse than nothing, I was a fool who had sent men to die for a lie. So I held firm even as they stripped me of my dignity. Even as they paraded me before crowds who jeered and spat. Even as my own body betrayed me, trembling with exhaustion and fear. They offered me mercy once. A confession, they said, and I could live. Imprisoned, silenced, but alive. I almost broke. God forgive me, I almost signed their paper, almost spoke the words that would unmake me. I wept, not for the fire I knew was coming, but for France. For the men who had believed in me. For Charles, who would never have to answer for his silence. But when I held the quill, my hand would not move. I looked at Cauchon, at the bishops, at the English soldiers watching from the shadows, and I understood they did not fear a witch. They feared a girl who had proven that God speaks to the powerless. That heaven does not need kings or clergy to enact its will. My conviction was their condemnation. So I set down the quill and spoke the only truth I had left. I will not deny what God has given me, even if it costs me everything. The verdict was already written. They called me relapsed heretic, sentenced me to purification by fire. I had saved France, and France would watch me burn. The morning they came for me, I was already awake. I had not slept. How could I? The dawn that breaks on your last day is not like other dawns. It arrives too quickly and too slowly at once. They dressed me in a long white shift, like a bride. Or a sacrifice. Perhaps there is no difference. My hair, which they had shaved in mockery months before, had grown back in uneven patches. I was 19 years old, and I looked like a ghost of the girl who had stormed Orleans. The guards led me through Rouen streets. Crowds lined the path, some weeping, some silent, some shouting condemnations as if their words could somehow justify what they were about to witness. I searched their faces for something. Mercy. Recognition. Shame. I found only the blank stare of people watching a spectacle they did not want to stop. The stake stood in the center of the square, wood piled high around its base. The priests were already there, chanting prayers that sounded less like salvation and more like erasure. They wanted to cleanse me from history, to make me a lesson rather than a legacy. Bishop Cauchon read the sentence. His voice carried across the square, detached and bureaucratic, as if he were cataloging grain rather than condemning a soul. I barely heard the words. I was looking at the sky, cloudless, impossibly blue. The kind of sky I used to see from my father's fields. They bound me to the stake. The ropes cut into my wrists, but I did not struggle. There was no point. This was always how it would end. The voices had never promised me victory. Only purpose. A priest held a cross before my face, close enough that I could focus on nothing else. I was grateful for that. I whispered prayers, not for rescue, but for meaning. Let this matter. Let my death mean something more than politics and fear. The torches were lit. I smelled the smoke before I felt the heat. Then the flames began to climb, hungry and relentless. The pain was immediate, absolute, beyond anything I had imagined. I heard myself scream, not words, just sound, the body's animal protest against its own destruction. But through the agony, I found my voice one final time. Jesus. Not a prayer. Not a plea. Just his name. The only truth I had ever needed. The smoke thickened. My vision blurred. The crowd disappeared. The priests. The soldiers. Even the pain began to fade into something distant and hollow. I looked up through the flames and saw the sky again. Still blue. Still endless. Still indifferent to the cruelty of men. My ashes would scatter. My name would be debated by scholars and kings who had never known me. Charles would reign over the France I had given him, haunted perhaps by the memory of the girl he had abandoned. But in that final moment, I understood, they could burn my body, but they could not touch what I had been. A peasant who heard God. A girl who believed. A soul that chose faith over survival. The flames consumed everything. Everything but that. I am smoke now. Ash scattered across cobblestones still warm from my burning. The crowd has dispersed, returning to their ordinary lives, carrying with them the memory of a girl who refused to lie. Some will forget me by nightfall. Others will remember forever, though they will argue about what, exactly, they witnessed. Was I a saint? A madwoman? A martyr? A fool? The bishops who condemned me will write their reports, careful to justify every decision, every question, every flame. They will sleep soundly, convinced they served God by destroying me. The English will celebrate a political victory, believing they have humiliated France by proving its savior was a heretic. And Charles, King Charles VII, crowned by my faith and my sword, will rule the kingdom I gave him, his silence now permanent, woven into the fabric of his reign. But here is what they do not understand, what they cannot erase no matter how thoroughly they burn: I was never the miracle. The miracle was that a peasant girl could make men believe in something greater than their own ambition. That faith, pure and uncompromising, could shake the foundations of empires built on lies. They feared me not because I was powerful, but because I was proof. Proof that God does not speak only through kings and clergy. Proof that holiness can emerge from the powerless. Proof that truth, even when it dies, leaves a mark that cannot be scrubbed away. My tragedy is not that I burned. Fire was always coming, for someone like me, in a world like theirs, it was inevitable. My tragedy is that I believed the men I saved would be worthy of salvation. That Charles would honor the divine mission that crowned him. That the church would recognize God's voice even when it came from a peasant's mouth. I was wrong about men. But I was not wrong about God. France will remember me, though not immediately. 25 years from now, they will reopen my trial. They will declare it unjust, my conviction false, my death a murder dressed as justice. They will call me martyr, then saint. My name will be whispered in prayers and shouted in battle cries. Girls will grow up hearing my story and believe, if only for a moment, that they too could change the world. But that vindication will not undo the fire. It will not return the voices I heard in my father's fields. It will not restore the faith I had before I learned that earthly power fears heavenly truth. I died because I would not lie. Not about what I heard. Not about what I believed. Not about who I was. And perhaps that is the only victory that matters in a world where kings betray and bishops condemn and the righteous burn while the corrupt endure. I heard God. I obeyed. I burned. But the flame that destroyed my body became the light that revealed their darkness. And in the end, that light will outlive every king, every bishop, every empire built on the backs of those who dared to speak truth. My ashes scatter. But my story remains. And it will burn brighter than any fire they could light.